Good morning, and welcome to the virtual worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Meeting House of Provincetown, where we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person and support each other on our spiritual search for truth and meaning. My name is Will Hildreth, and I'm the president of the board at the Meeting House. We're so glad that you've joined us this week. Reverend Kate was feeling a bit under the weather this week, so she asked some of her friends to help out with today's service. She reminds us that this is one of the most valuable lessons we can learn from spiritual community, to ask for the help we need and to accept it when offered. And now, as I light my candle this morning, I invite you to light a candle wherever you are. In this way, we can feel connected even when we are apart.
We come with the weight of life, held quietly in the secret spaces of our heart. The ballast of our spirits so easily shifts and knocks us off center. Into this sacred time we enter, hoping to find a voice, a song, a moment of sacred silence that will bring us back to balance, that will anchor us again in beauty, trust, and connection. We light our chalice this morning in gratitude for the many ways we help each other return home.
Please join with me as we affirm our covenant. Love is the spirit of this meeting house. And this is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another.
Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return to what you are, return to who you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home your soul reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home soul reborn again. Return to who you are. Return to who you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to what you are. Return to who you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul and reborn again. Return to what you are. Return to who you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return to what you are. Return to who you are. Return to where you are. Born and reborn again. Return again. Return again. Return to the home of your soul.
Hi, this is Liz Levitt, coming to you from Kaneohe, Hawaii, on the island of Oahu. I'm a longtime friend of Reverend Kate's, and I'm glad to be able to bring you this prayer. This is Prayer by Frederick Gillis. Spirit of community, in which we share and find strength and common purpose. We turn our minds and hearts toward one another, seeking to bring into our circle of concern all who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who are in pain, either in body or in spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. As part of this sacred prayer, I invite you to say aloud the names of those who you would have us lift up and hold in our care and love today. We are part of a web of life that makes us one with all humanity, one with all the universe. We are grateful for the miracle of consciousness that we share, the consciousness that gives us power to remember, to love, and to care. Amen.
Spirit of life, come to me. Sing in my heart all stirrings of compassion. Blow in the winds, rise in the sea, move in the shape of justice, roots only close.
Blue Sky Returning by Reverend Linda Susan Ulrich. Before I moved to Michigan, friends warned me about the long months of overcast skies. I'd lived in climates where winter came with snow and freezing temperatures, but also included plenty of sunshine and that sharp cobalt reserved for particularly cold days. Here, though, the latter two seem to vanish sometime in November. By the time April rolls around, I find the blue that returns to the sky confusing. My brain can't quite make sense of it. My eyes are so unused to anything other than gray that they don't know how to process the richness of another color. It's as though they've survived on thin gruel for several months and are suddenly presented with molten chocolate cake. I can fall into living like that too, hunkered down, nose to the grindstone, out of touch with what feeds my soul. I'll focus so much on getting through the bare essentials of the day that I'm not sure what to do when an opportunity for joy pops up. Is it real? Do I deserve Technicolor experiences? Shouldn't I keep my expectations low since the gray will inevitably return? Then I remind myself that my singular life is part of that Technicolor tapestry, along with the tumbling waterfalls and purring cats and unfurling blossoms. I can no more step outside the vibrant flow of life than I can reverse the cycle of the seasons. However imperfectly I may be living this life of mine, there's no one better at it, and there's no one else who can do it for me. While the gray days aren't over yet, there's still joy to be found in the sight of bare branches against a luminous sky. A veil may obscure the vivid hues for now, but I can look with new eyes for the essential richness underneath.
As the season continues to turn to spring all around us, I am drawn to the concept of turning. Have you ever noticed how many phrases have the word turn in them? The turn of the season, taking your turn, turning around, turning the calendar page, a turn of phrase, a turn for the worse, at every turn, out of turn, turn something on its head, one good turn deserves another, taking a wrong turn, not knowing where to turn, turning inward, turning to one another, returning. I actually had to stop myself because there were hundreds and hundreds of expressions with the word turn in them. And actually, many of them are so resonant with what we do around here. Why we come together on Sundays, why we seek community, why we have faith at all. We seek time and space to intentionally turn inward, to reflect. We turn to one another for support and encouragement. We want to turn our world more toward justice. We return to our spiritual home week after week because returning to center gives us pause, gives us perspective, gives us a sense that we are part of something larger than ourselves. I think of the opening song by the choir, return again, return to the home of your soul. And I hope that when we are at a point in our lives where we do not know where to turn, this community comes to mind and we make our way towards each other and we find at least a part of that peace we were looking for. In her poem, How It Is With Us and How It Is With Them, Mary Oliver says it this way: we become religious, then we turn from it. Then we are in need, and maybe we turn back. We turn to making money, then we turn to the moral life. Then we think about money again. We meet wonderful people, but lose them in our busyness. We're, as the saying goes, all over the place. Steadfastness, it seems, is more about dogs than about us. One of the reasons we love them so much. Turning to each other and then losing sight of one another and returning, it's a very human behavior. Turning to the moral life and then thinking about money again, being all over the place in our busyness. That is such a good description of our human condition. Were we but dogs, then we could be steadfast, but instead we are turning creatures. But I love that Mary Oliver seems to agree that turning, although not ideal, can be religious. There is also, of course, a danger in our turning. We can turn away from our values as well as refinding them. We can turn sour. We can turn bitter. We can turn moody. Our turning can be like a storm suddenly darkening a sky. People become wary of us. They carry umbrellas. If we are finding ourselves turning very quickly from happiness to tears, joy to anger, adoration to blame, well, that's something to watch out for, be mindful of, check in with our therapists about. But turning, it can also be a gift, a choice, a sacred task. What are some of the sacred turns we can take? Turning to beauty and joy after anger or grief or despair. Turning our eyes up to the blue sky after months of gray. Turning inward when we need to recenter ourselves. Turning to one another when we are struggling. Turning it all over when the world is too much for us. This morning, I will share 3 stories of turning. The first is turning inward. Anne LeClaire is an author who lives on Cape Cod. She wrote a book a number of years ago called Listening Below the Noise, which chronicled her adventure of turning inward after choosing to spend 2 days each month in silence. Anne was an unlikely candidate for an oath of silence. The concept was alien to my personality, she admits. In high school, I was once given 3 detentions in a single study hall because I found it impossible to sit through 40 minutes without talking to the girl next to me. The idea to stop talking struck her while she was walking on a beach. A disembodied voice told her, "Sit in silence." And oddly, the voice didn't frighten her, she says. For some reason, it did not cause me to panic or question my stability. And no, I didn't think I was being sent a message from heaven. But she did listen to the message. The next day, she stopped talking for the very first time in her life. Anne's practice of silence, which she has kept for 2 days every month ever since that voice spoke to her all those years ago, has offered her many gifts. She's learned to more deeply value her life and her relationships. She connected with her inner self. She learned about forgiveness and letting go. The practice also helped correct her tendency to be critical of others. Once at an artist's retreat, she listened as the others introduced themselves. I slipped into critical mind, she said. One was boastful, another authoritative, still another boring, and a fourth dominated the conversation. I was not speaking, but my mind was busy, impatient, disapproving. Once again, I was so busy judging, I was unable to hear. I was separated from my fellow artists not only by my silence, but by my own insecurities, which had engendered a need to be superior, so very often the place out of which judgment is born. Slowly, by turning inward in silence and really listening to her thoughts as they arose, Anne was able to make another shift, to turn away from judgment of herself and of others. And then she was really able to listen. The second story I have for you is the most extraordinary story I've ever heard of people turning towards one another instead of away. It takes place back in September of 2017, when there was a huge Trump rally in Washington, D.C. Activist Hawk, Newsom, and some of his friends from the Black Lives Matter movement stood defiantly at the edge of the rally, offering what he saw as a counter message to the Trump supporters. As the president of Black Lives Matter of Greater New York, Newsom was prepared to spend the night engaging in tense exchanges with people he knew would not be receptive to his message. Instead, Tommy Hodges, one of the organizers of the Trump rally, made an unexpected move. Today's rally, he said directly to Newsom, is about freedom of speech. It's about celebration. So what we're going to do is something you're not used to, and we're going to give you 2 minutes of our platform to put your message out. Whether they disagree or agree with your message is irrelevant. It is the fact that you have the right to have the message. It's your right to say what you believe, and it's their right to let you know what they think about what you're saying. Some of the Trump supporters booed at this invitation, and some of his own friends urged him not to engage, but, heart in his throat, Newsom decided to accept the invitation and go up on stage. "I am an American," he said. "And the beauty of America is that when you see something broke in your country, you can mobilize to fix it." Some of the crowd continued booing, but some began to nod. "So you ask why there's a Black Lives Matter," Newsom said. "Because you can watch a Black man die and be choked to death on television and nothing happens. We need to address that." "Hey, no, shut up. That was a criminal," one woman shouted. But Newsom continued talking slowly, steadily, without anger. "We are not anti-cop," he said, eliciting a mixed reaction from the crowd. "We are anti-bad cop," he continued. "We say if a cop is bad, he needs to get fired like a bad plumber, a bad lawyer, like a bad politician." The crowd seemed to like this. A few people cheered. But then someone else from the crowd shouted, "All lives matter." Newsom addressed the heckler directly. "You are so right. All lives matter, right? But when a Black life is lost, we get no justice. That's why we say Black lives matter." Seeing that his 2 minutes was coming to a close, Newsom ended by saying, "If we really want America great, we do it together." And then the crowd cheered. Afterward, some of the Trump supporters approached him and expressed their appreciation for his speech, including a Bikers for Trump member who asked if Newsom would pose for a photo with his grandson. After a video of the impromptu speech went viral, some activists were critical of it, saying that real change is systemic and that it's counterproductive to focus on a story of a handful of people being able to talk together in a new way. But that's not how I see it. In that story, I saw a sacred turn happening. In her book, Turning to One Another, Margaret Wheatley writes, "I believe we can change the world if we start listening to one another again. I still believe this. I still believe that if we turn to one another, if we begin talking with each other, especially with those we call stranger or enemy, then this world can reverse its darkening direction and change for the good. And I know with all my heart that the only way the world will change is if many more of us step forward, let go of our judgments, become curious about each other, and take the risk to begin a conversation." So we have a story of turning inward and a story of turning to one another. And now I share a final story with you about turning things over to a source beyond ourselves. It's kind of like the third step in Alcoholics Anonymous. It's from the author Anne Lamott from her book, Traveling Mercies. She describes her descent into substance abuse and self-loathing. At rock bottom, she is alone, drinking and popping pills every day, day after day, night after night, hoping that perhaps one morning she just won't wake up at all. Out of nowhere, she suddenly has the sense that Jesus is crouching in the corner of her bedroom, watching her with unending patience and love. Raised in a secular family, she is naturally appalled. "I'd rather die than let you in," she says out loud to the apparition, and she continues on her path of self-destruction. But somehow she can't shake the Jesus figure. So that Sunday, she goes to a church service, so hungover that she can't even stand up for the hymns. The sermon strikes her as completely ridiculous, like someone trying to convince me of the existence of extraterrestrials, she remembers. But then the final hymn cracks her open. It was as if the people were singing in between the notes, she says, weeping and joyful at the same time, and I felt like their voices or something was rocking me in its bosom, holding me like a scared kid. And I opened up to that feeling, and it washed over me. Anne left before the benediction. Crying, she ran from the church and raced home, Jesus running alongside her like a cat at her heels. And when she opened the door to her house, she stood there a minute, and then, grudgingly, so grudgingly, took a deep breath and said, "All right, you can come in." And that was her moment of faith finding. And although it didn't happen that day, Anne has been sober for 32 years. Now, maybe you won't find Jesus crouching in your bedroom, and maybe you will never face a crowd full of people hating you and be brave enough to point out that what you have in common, and maybe you won't decide to spend 2 days in silence each month. But throughout this week, I invite you to turn inward, turn toward a friend, turn your sorrows and regrets over to a power greater than yourself. Turn your face up to the blue sky whenever it finally appears, even if you have become so accustomed to seeing gray. I invite you to make even the smallest turn when you can and see how it feels. Use any excuse, any reminder to return to who you are, return to what you are. And of course, I invite you to return here next week to this beloved community. In her poem, Annunciation, Mary Howe writes, "Even if I don't see it again, nor ever feel it, I know it is, and that if once it hailed me, it ever does. And so it is myself I want to turn in that direction, not as towards a place, but it was a tilting within myself as one turns a mirror to flash the light to where it isn't. I was blinded like that and swam in what shone at me, only able to endure it by being no one and so specifically myself, I thought I'd die from being loved like that." May it be so for each of us. Amen. And blessed be.